Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of From Page to Stage. Now, I am very excited to share with you an interview with the amazing Corey Poirier. I've got a special relationship with Corey because he has gently wooed me over the last couple of years, and I will be appearing on his stage in Cambridge later on this year, which I am very excited about. But we'll tell you a bit more about that later. From now, we're going to focus on From Page to Stage. Corey, welcome. And would you give us a little bit of an introduction as to how you got to where you are today, please?
Yeah, thank you so much, Wendy. I'm honored to be here, and I'm happy to give a bit of an introduction. And in fact, truthfully, I don't know if I would be if it wasn't for both sides of those equations, page and stage. And so a bit of my backstory is I spent 10 years in the corporate world in sales, selling photocopiers door to door. If anybody wants to go into that business, they can let me know and I can hook them up. I wouldn't recommend it. And it's not an easy business. I mean, it's the thing nobody wants to buy, a yellow photocopier. When I say, I mean, it's yellow usually when it's older, but we used to sell used ones and new. So nobody wants to buy a photocopier, whether it's to replace a yellow one or to buy a yellow one. So it's a tough sell. And what happened was, while I was in my last few years of that industry, I won't go too far into this. I'll just say I got tricked into performing stand-up comedy one night, and that led me into speaking because I was terrified of the idea of being on a stage. But I went on the stage and performed, and it's funny, I bombed, as we call it in comedy, like I was terrible. But something happened, like it was like I kind of like this. And I went back again the next week and so on for 700 shows, 9 years. But when I
shows.
Yeah. So it wasn't like I I could say it was a hobby, but it was definitely a busy hobby. And by the end of it, I was getting paid. I was hosting my own comedy show and all that kind of stuff. And but in the first year, I went to a Tony Robbins event with a friend. I believe, if I remember correctly, they gave me the ticket, but I went with them. And they said, "Can you believe he's getting paid to do this?" And everything changed. Like it was like as they say, a record scratch moment. Like the record stopped, and I was like, "Wait a minute, people get paid to do this?" I'm going to a comedy club and paying $5 in gas and dragging all the comics there with me, and we're getting like $5 or $10 from the door, and somebody's getting paid to do this, and they don't have to deal with hecklers, and it's not nighttime, and on and on and on. I was like, I want to know more about that. So that's kind of how I got into speaking, and then the other side of things was the written word. And my what happened with me with the written word is I didn't read a book until age 27. So in school, they would say, read this book, read that book. So I read the first of 3 books in my whole life at that point, which was To Kill a Mockingbird, Lord of the Flies, and Death of a Salesman. And I never finished any of them. The only personal book I ever...
Stop. I just want to clarify something. Yeah. You didn't read because you didn't want to, or because you were struggling with something like dyslexia?
I didn't want to. I didn't find it interesting, is what it was. Like it wasn't to me, it was just like I was like a labor, it was like having to do work to read. Excuse me. And I didn't understand it. I didn't understand why anybody would hold a book in their hands and read it. I just didn't get it. Now, the irony of that is, Wendy, is that I told my mother before I turned 27, before I read my first book cover to cover, that I wanted to write a book. And her comment was, "I think you have to read one first."
So go mom.
Exactly. And I think what was going on there at that point, I was more in love with the idea and thought it was sexy to be a writer than I was actually about impact of reading, because I didn't really understand it. Now, I'd written music at that point. Like I wrote music when I was 12. So obviously I wrote it long before that. So I was writing music. I wrote comedy. I wrote a stage play, all before I read a first book. And then I read a book and it changed my life, which we can talk about what that book that was. But I just, but my point of that is that I think I liked the writing side of it. And I think I think I did like the impact, but I think it was more about me early on. Like, me getting something out of me getting something out of my system versus doing it for somebody else. And so that's really ultimately the writing side of a book was appealing. And then I read my first book, which was Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. Then I read my second book, which was Think and Grow Rich. And I
Yep.
always say to people, if you're going to start late, that's a good way to start. My mother bought How to Win Friends for $1 at a flea market,
Oh,
and
great.
and then put it in my bag while I was going away for a company retreat. And interestingly, the only reason I read it is because there were 3 people in the cottage I was in, and the company put us at a different end of the place, the town, by ourselves, and the 3 people I was there with were pretty negative. So I just didn't want to be in that negativity. So they said they're going to go. They asked me if I wanted to go kayaking, and I said no, I have a book to read because I discovered it in my bag. And that's what I did. I read the book solely. And I mean, I could have faked it, but I didn't. I read the book solely to not go with them. And I didn't know how much I'd read because I'd never read a book, but I read the first page and I was hooked. And I couldn't put it down. I read it twice that weekend. So I should say, instead of Think and Grow Rich, I read my first and second book were How to Win Friends. My third book was Think and Grow Rich because I read How to Win Friends twice in a row. And that changed my entire life, trajectory of life. That was before I ever heavily got into the stuff I'm doing now. I feel it opened the doors for everything. So go back to my other point, writing or the written word and speaking changed my life. Well, if you think about it, I got into comedy, it changed my life. I watched Tony Robbins, realized he was getting paid, it changed my life. I read a first book, it changed my life. I wrote a first book, it changed my life. So those 2 things you're talking about are my jam.
Aren't they just? So, okay, I'm taking you back a step for a second. Which came first, writing or speaking?
Speaking by what do they say, Minnesota mile? Speaking by a long shot.
Okay.
So the speaking started almost immediately after I did stand-up comedy, which would be about 2001. And then writing, I don't know the year it was, but I feel like it was maybe 4 years after that.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I never wrote, I mean, I wrote a word, but I never wrote a full book until, actually, I never wrote in a book and had a book published until I read the first one. And by the time I was doing stand-up comedy, I still hadn't read a book. So when I say wrote a first book, my first book wasn't even a full book of my own. It
Okay.
was as we call them, a compilation or an anthology book.
I think that's often where people get their first taste of it, isn't it? In terms of being published. I mean, as you said, you've been writing for years, whether it be music or comedy or anything like that. But I mean, there are a number of people who've been blogging for ages or journaling. I was talking to somebody, I believe you know Crystal Hill.
Yeah, yes, I do. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I interviewed her last week, and she was saying that her first writing experience was when she was 9.
Wow. Well, she's got me beat because when I said I wrote music much before that, I think I said it was 12 or maybe 11, but 12 at the oldest that I wrote my first song start to finish. And quite honestly, I started playing guitar, I think around age 9, but I was terrible. And I kept playing at it. And I think by age 13 or 14, I was still terrible. So it's still fascinating to me. The song I wrote then still holds up today, and I would still put it up against anything I've ever written. And it's a complete song start to finish. And yet I don't think I could play anybody else's song from start to finish at that point. So I find that fascinating too.
Well, I mean, again, a testament to the fact that you're not going to be beaten, are you?
No, well,
you set your mind to something and you jolly well get on and do it.
You have to, right? I mean, it's honestly the law of attraction. People hear about it a lot, but the Secret made it famous, the Secret documentary. And I always talk about the fact that what I think was missing was, and it's not a disparagement because I think the movie introduced a lot of people to the world of spirituality. But the one thing that was missing, I think, is the law of action. And I find it fascinating that the word action is in the word attraction. It's even part of the word, but it was left out. And so to your point, the reason I think for me that quote unquote, I won't allow something, no, I'm not worried about somebody, but something to beat me is because I realized that long ago that if you take action and keep taking massive action, then the only way you lose is if you quit. Like you can't lose. Like eventually it'll work out. Like music is the perfect example because, well, comedy is too, because I said I bombed that first night. Well, I didn't get a real laugh probably a year and a half in. So imagine going twice a week, some weeks, maybe there's even some weeks we had 3 times a week performing, writing material at home in between that. So you're probably putting in like 30 hours a week to
Mhm.
get paid like $5 at the door and get no laughs for a year and a half and keep going. Same thing with
And
music. My
that's
first,
after you found the on switch on the microphone, isn't it?
yeah, well, truthfully, the very first, and you might be referencing this, but the first time I
Yes.
performed, I didn't have the mic turned on, and
Yeah,
I didn't.
exactly.
And I joked that the guy that got us into comedy told us how to adjust the mic stand and talked about his favorite comic. So I joked, it was his fault because he never told us how to turn it on. But, probably somebody should be able to figure that out on their own. The music side, though, I was dating a girl I remember years ago, and she heard me singing for the first time. And she was like, "Oh my God, please stop. My ears are bleeding." Some form of that. And if you ever sing in public, let me know, because I think we may have to finish this relationship so that you don't embarrass me in public. That was my first time singing. And fast forward 10 years ago now, which is crazy to me to think, makes me feel kind of old, but 10 years ago now, my fourth CD was out and got nominated for Rock Recording of the Year. And I have a music video out and I've been on the radio. But my point is, Wendy, what you said is, I think if you keep taking action, it's the 10,000 hour rule in real life, if people have heard of that. But if you keep taking action, I don't think you can lose unless you quit.
Yeah. Again, it's going back to that analogy that's in the Think and Grow Rich book about the gold mine, how the guy actually gave up 6 inches from the thread of gold. And how tragic is that? You never know how close you are. You just got to keep going.
Absolutely.
Patience and persistence, my 2 Ps that I love.
Yeah,
Anyway, so we've established that it was speaking first, then you went to writing, and obviously you speak on stage now, and you're writing, so you're flip-flopping backwards and forwards. You're clearly a very creative person because you're also a musician and a comic. Are you still doing any stand-up these days?
No. No is the almost definitive answer. So it's kind of interesting. The first time my wife ever heard me perform was, I was already at the end of quote unquote my comedy career. I hadn't performed in a little bit, but I got a call about performing at Second City, which in North America is like the epicenter of comedy. It's like where a lot of the biggest comics got trained, like what's his name, Mike Myers, Dana Carvey, Dan Aykroyd, Chevy Chase. Like, they all went through this place called Second City. And there was a Canadian one in Chicago where it started, which is, Second City is named after Chicago because it's the second city. But then they opened one in Toronto, Canada, and I get an opportunity to perform there. That was the first time my wife ever seen me perform, which I thought was, again, pretty epic. That, the first time she ever sees me perform is at the biggest show I've ever done. But then 2 years ago, I think it was, 2 summers ago, I wanted to perform at the Apollo in New York. And it's a place where, like, you can get literally booed / screamed off the stage. Like, it's real deal. Like, most people can't make it on that stage at all. But I foolishly, I want to try. And maybe the universe has held me off from doing it because it's going to be so brutal. But I wanted to submit an application. To submit an application, you had to have a video. And I went and looked at all my video was of me with hair, because that's how long it had been since I was performing. And so that summer I did a tour, which was only really 4 shows. And so I performed 4 times about a year and a half ago in the summer. I performed, or actually it'd be 2 years almost, because we're going into summer now. I performed 4 shows. That's the only shows I performed, I think. That's one of only, I'll say it's 4 of only 5 shows I've done since the Second City thing, which would have been 2015. And the 5th show was another one of those can't say no things, which was at the Improv in California. Okay. So like, basically the takeaway from that, Wendy, is if somebody comes calling and it's a show where I'm going to regret if I don't ever get to be able to say I performed at this epic place, then I'm in. The downside of that is I'm not like, they say always be ready for your opportunity. And the truth is I can get ready quickly, but I'm not always ready for comedy. Like, I'm not just sitting here with a bunch of material that I practiced. And because comedy, usually you have to be practiced. Like, you have to be in front of an audience, testing it, making sure it still works. Make sure you don't forget where you said this thing versus saying that thing. Rewatch old videos. Like, there's a lot to it. It's not just show up on stage that night. I mean, you can. You can, but you'll either bomb horribly, or you're going to be only doing old material that you've already done 1,000 times. But you're not going to be able to show up to a comedy show with brand new material, not been tested, and then usually knock it out of the park. I don't know. I can't think of one instance where a comic has done that.
Well, the point, it's one of those genres that is so well rehearsed that it looks spontaneous.
You know what? When you say that, I interviewed a guy one time, a fellow comic, and I asked him, what do you think the thing is that the average person doesn't realize about stand-up comedy? And his comment echoes what you just said. He said, how much work goes into it to make it work like no work at all goes into it?
Yeah. But and that I don't think it's only for comedy. I think any skill, or was it Michael Jordan was doing his baskets and forever and ever and ever until he couldn't get it wrong.
Right.
So and again, I think particularly for speakers, and my experience with working with speakers has been that they haven't given themselves the opportunity to go over their work. Now, you and I are both TEDx trainers, and you know how TEDx loves to have everything scripted.
Yes.
I usually get a big glare when I go into the first meeting and go, okay, guys, I know you've learnt your lines, but I don't want you to read them. And the TEDx goes, oh, I know, just close your ears a minute. But the point is, if you learn it verbatim and suddenly you get a lapse in concentration, it's like learning your lines for a play. You don't get the cue, you can't carry on. But if you know your material so well as you do with comedy, then, okay, you're going to heckle. You work around it. You pull it in. You know your material so well. But before we got on camera, we were talking about one of our TEDx speakers who had a cochlear implant. On the day, he went well off-piste. And I'm going, good on you, kid. Oh, he brought it back beautifully, but I could see the team going, getting quite aerated. He did a really good job, and probably a far better one than if he'd kept to official script. Know your material.
Yeah, it's funny when you say this, because I'm getting ready to, and I haven't announced it because they haven't given us any flyers or anything. So I'm one of those people, like maybe superstitious, I'm not sure, but I don't like announcing it until I like have official. And so I'm about to do my 5th TEDx 3 weeks away, but yet I haven't got any material. So I'm just like not talking about it. Yeah. But the funny part is, to your point, this one here is the exact opposite of what I've experienced in the past. So I've had my last one, my 4th one was this year, or no, the fall of last year. It's really weird because I only did 3 for years, and I always said I'm going to retire at 3, and then I get like the comedy, I almost got tricked into applying, and so I foolishly did, and then I got 4, and I don't like staying at 4. I either like 3 or 5, like as far as numbers. And so I knew I was going to go for a 5th one, but the 4th one, it was almost a marathon. It was like running a marathon. Like we had to meet 3 times, I think it was, for 3 hours and go over everything. We had to, if we missed one of those, we had to show up for a different time. They had open calls twice a week for like 3 months where you could jump on and the person was there. The person that was our speaking coach had to approve every script down to the word, or you couldn't do the talk. Like it was super intense. It was like the most intense TEDx. And this one's the exact opposite. She's just like, just show up between 3 and 6. And she said the only thing we had to do was, she said, record a video of you doing the talk roughly, and we'll go through the guidelines, make sure it meets the guidelines, and we like the idea. And then if we do, you can just practice until the day. So I sent in a video 2 days before the deadline. She came back, said, we can't really think of anything to change. We really like it. You're good to go. Can you send us a photo so we can do a flyer? That's that's everything so far. And we're 3 weeks away, and I have no reason to believe it's not going to stay this way. And then I'll show up in town the night before. I just bought my ticket yesterday. And then I'll be there. She said we had to be there 3 to 6. So not even an audition or dinner the night before, nothing. I'll be there 3 to 6. And then I fly to a different city at 7 o'clock.
So you're not even doing sound checks or anything ahead of time?
I think, well, I think that the event starts at 4 and we gotta be there at 3. So that's our sound check, probably. So
on the lineup?
What's that? Sorry?
How many people on the lineup?
I didn't even ask, and I don't know.
Right.
It's and honestly, this favors me, meaning like I like it because I already know what I'm going to do. I already know the stuff, but I actually got helped somebody else land a talk at the same place, and she's probably like panicking because she hasn't done one before, so she probably wants to help. So it can work for either or. Now, by the way, I would be worried, like, is it even real based on how it's structured? But the reason I know it is because it's with a certain university. The person's listed where I found them. Their bio and stuff is listed with the university. And the biggest thing is on TED.com, when you go to that event, they're the organizer. So all of that, they can't fake all that. Like, in other words, you can't get on TED. You have to get a license with TED. So, I mean, it's not like you can just get yourself on the website as an organizer. So I know it's legit, but I've just never experienced anything like that before where it's like, just show up.
I'm wondering whether it's for everyone or they've done their research on you and know, oh, come on, this guy's going after his 5th one. I think he can do it in his sleep.
Well, I know that's not the case, only because the other person is not getting any more than me. She's asking me, did they get back to you on your video yet? She, and in fact, I put them in contact with her after, but it started out more me. So they were asking me, do you know of another speaker? So I pitched her as well. And yeah, so I know that she's not getting any more communication than me.
Right. Okay.
And it's not a knock on them. Like I said, from my end, I like it. And I will say, looking at 5, it's been all over the place. Meaning, like, one of them I had where I showed up and met with the met with the coach, and he had saw all the stuff I did. And instead of him coaching me, he started asking me for advice on the other speakers that he was coaching. So that one, I didn't really have to do much. And then the first one I ever did, they already were full, and they liked my talk enough that when somebody pulled out, they reached out to me next. And it was like 2 weeks before. So my first one ever, I had 2 weeks notice.
Whoa.
And so I had no coaching, no nothing. I met them for the first time at the event, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sure the rest of them might have had coaching, but I didn't because I was so last minute. I missed everything. So what I'm getting at is that I've had every different experience. So I don't judge it like, oh, well, how come this one's not doing as much as far as prep? I could have judged the other one and said, how come this one's doing too much for prep? It's just, I think you understand this too, Wendy. It's different organizers. They're going to operate different ways.
Oh, they do, don't they?
Yeah, that was a long tangent on TEDx. But yeah, for me, I will say I do at beginning, I memorized my talk for TEDx, only for TEDx, by the way. I never memorized any other talk I ever deliver, but I do memorize it. I practice it like 50 times into my phone while I'm driving places. So in other words, I don't stop and I don't sit there for a full day and practice it. I just practice it as I'm going. But the reason I'm doing that is it goes back to what you said a minute ago. Now I can ad lib because I come from comedy and improv background. But for me, with the TEDx, I want to know it so well. So to your point, not script it, know it so well that if I fall off track, it's easy for me to get back on track. And so to me, some people think of them both the same. I see them as different, like you do. The fact that scripted versus knowing it inside and out, I see them as totally different things. Because if you know your talk inside and out, you could ultimately make a decision that, okay, well, that thing I had scripted all along, a day before, you could be like, this isn't relevant anymore because this happened on the way to the event.
Yep.
So I still know the whole talk, but I might just like switch one little nuance and it's not going to throw me off. But if it's a script where I memorized every word for word, line for line, and then I try to change something out, it's going to really throw things off.
It is. I mean, from a neuroanatomy perspective, it uses different parts of your brain. As to whether you're learning it verbatim like that, or whether it's a case of, right, I've got this, I know what I'm saying, I know it inside out. So should I need to, I can divert and come back again. So yeah, absolutely. Beautiful. So we've got then that speaking came first, then you went to writing, and then it's kind of equal at the moment because you've just produced a book, haven't you? You've just published a book.
Well, just is very operative word because it's in the middle of, it's available now for pre-order as we're talking right now. And at the same time, the pub date, as they call it, the publication date is June 25th. So it's in between.
So it's not out yet. Sorry.
You can't hold it in your hands, but it's available to buy. And what's available now, which won't be available once it's kind of out, as we call it, is a lot of bonuses that people get when they buy the book. So now is kind of the time to buy it, because we got to, well, it's funny. One of the things which we've never, ever done before is, there's 5 bonuses and a bonus. But anyway, one of the bonuses is access to a masterclass I did around how to land your brand to talk like a TEDx. And this is equivalent to a $5,000 program we do, like it's a condensed version of it. And it's just one of the free bonuses. So basically you buy like a, depending on where you're at, 16 or a little less or a little more dollar book, and get access to what we've had people pay $5,000 for, in terms of they get the whole program, but you're still getting the knowledge for that. And then also another thing is a Get Paid to Speak book that I put out that we just revised. It has not even available yet to buy in the revisioned version, and you get that as well. So yeah, so we designed it so you can get a bunch of cool bonuses before everybody else can get the book. And so, in a long story short, on the book, it's called The Enlightened Passenger, which is, you can't see it all behind me. That
background,
yeah, but it's in the background. The Enlightened Passenger. What's different about this than most other books, that especially books that are being launched the way it is that it's a fictional parable. So it's like The Alchemist, or The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, or the Celestine Prophecy, and continue on that path, like those type of books. It's that type of book, and the idea is 2 passengers on a plane, older guy, younger guy. The older guy, basically the younger guy didn't want the older guy sitting next to him. The younger guy's like a business guy. He paid extra to have the seat taken and nobody there. He fell asleep. He woke up, the old guy's next to him. He got bumped up from economy. And so it turns into a thing where the young guy reluctantly starts learning from the older guy. And the only reason he even is willing to do it is because the older guy, he found out the older guy's wealthy, and he wants to know how he got it. So he's only listening because he's like, maybe I can figure out how he got the money and stuff. But as we go through the whole story, ultimately we start to realize that the older guy is wealthy in wisdom and knowledge and that type of thing, and life experience. And he teaches 10 lessons to the young guy that basically change his life forever, which is why it's called The Flight That Changes Everything. And I'll add too, what's really unique about it, it's loosely based on my experience interviewing over 7,500 of the world's top thought leaders. And so those 10 lessons are the 10 lessons I've learned during interviews with everyone from the legendary Les Brown to Lisa Nichols from The Secret to Jack Canfield, Chicken Soup for the Soul, and another 7,000 plus thought leaders at that level. It's basically you're learning what it took me all those years and thousands of hours to learn, but you're learning it through 2 characters in a story.
And the art of storytelling and the way that story can get in under the radar of consciousness. And you look to all the greats in terms of religious leaders, they've all taught stories. They've all taught in parables. And so I love the idea, I really do, because you can get some wisdom in there that if you put it up straight, if you will, there's that ego part of your brain that goes, no, don't want to hear this. This is a little bit too confronting. Whereas if it goes under the radar, next thing you know is, yeah, I needed to hear that. Yeah, I love it. Love it.
Well, I will say to your point, Wendy, is that in a lot of ways, it's kind of like meta, as they call it, or a thing within a thing, in the sense that you're actually, in a lot of ways, you as the reader is that young business person that's reluctant to hear this. And so you're actually learning through the character, and it could be a reflection of you. And it doesn't mean it is. Some people might be that older, wiser guy. Some people might be neither. But in a lot of ways, the character is meant to reflect the reader, and the reader's meant to learn as if as if they were the person being taught it. To your point, though, it's done in such a way that it doesn't feel like you're learning until you actually. So it's like we're tricking you into learning in some way.
Yeah, that's the point, isn't it? Because you then sort of, as I said, it gets in under the radar. And the art of a good story is that the listener or reader puts themselves in the position of either the antagonist, protagonist, or whoever, they will identify with a character.
Absolutely.
They'll go with you. The art of a great story. And you know very well how to do that from stage, because that's what really lights people up, isn't it? Being able to tell those stories. The reason I'm mentioning this is because a lot of our listeners are authors primarily. That's their zone of genius. They've poured their heart and soul into their writing, particularly those who are entrepreneurs, and they've maybe put in a chapter in an anthology, in a multi-author book, as their first opportunity to try out the writing thing. And it can be a very challenging situation, because very often they're sharing an origin story as to what prompted them to get into business, in the void that they found, and how they filled it. I mean, I found that working with authors, some of them, that's as much as they want to do, because actually speaking those words out loud is even more confronting. They've gone through that first cathartic level of writing it down, but then you want me to speak it out as well? Yikes. And again, that's that really confrontational stuff. So one of the things that I do when I work with authors or speakers generally, if they've got an origin story to tell, is we look at how you language it, so that you speak from your scars, not your wounds. And you say it in such a way that you're not re-traumatizing yourself. You can still tell that story very powerfully without, from a neuroplastic perspective, really getting that groove going, because you don't want to revisit that. Of course you don't. So this is the art of the great story, isn't it?
It is. And I think something you said there, I like that, scar, not the wound, but I will say, one of the things for me is, I think to that point, it's, one of the things I always say to people, as far as they'll say, well, I have this story I want to share, and we'll talk about it, and I'll see that it's bringing them angst or bitterness. Like, so for example, let's say their talk was about surviving my divorce, and they're like angry at their ex and talking about it that way. I'm open with people, and I'll say, I don't think you're ready to share this yet, because you haven't healed from it yet. Like, I think to share from a perspective of transforming somebody else, you have to have transformed and or at least healed from what you're talking about. Like, to your point, you're going to have scars. And I think the scars is what keeps your story amazing and will allow other people to relate to it. But if you are still in it, if you're still in the story, you're not out of it yet, then I think you're doing everybody a disservice. Unfortunately, in some cases, as speakers, we get up there and it becomes therapy then, versus anything else. So to your point, I agree. I love that. Like, don't reopen it. Don't speak from the perspective where it's going to re-traumatize you. Speak from the perspective of, what you've learned from it, the battle scars, that type of thing. Much the same way, I don't think you're ready yet if you're still in it. If you're still bitter about the circumstance, if you haven't healed from it, if you haven't moved on from it to some degree, I think it's, you wait and you find another thing that you've moved on from and you healed, and use that as your story until the other one's ready.
Exactly. And that's the point. I mean, there are common threads through life, even if the exact circumstances are different for the audience, say, than the speaker. But there'll be something that they latch onto, back to your wonderful passenger, that there'll be something that I can relate to, even if it's not exactly the same circumstance, that common thread that runs through it. And that's what we're picking up on, isn't it? So the theme, even if it's not the identical vehicle for taking the theme. Yeah, love it. Beautiful. So your book, the physical book, is published in June, did you say?
Correct. Yeah.
Right. But before that is when we can pre-order. Now, the pre-order, does that include the Kindle version? Because obviously there'll be people who prefer to do the screen thing.
So the way it's structured, so this book is with a traditional publisher. And so ultimately, and I'd have to look, because the book just got up for pre-order like in the last couple of days. I assume they put up the Kindle at the same time, meaning I'm making an assumption. I know we're focused on the print version, but I'm pretty sure both when a person's listening to this, if they want to go over and grab it, I'm pretty sure both are available. When you go over to when you go to I'll give you a website. This is thebook.com. This is pretty easy.
We'll make sure that's in the show notes as well.
Yeah, so go to that page. This is thebook.com, and then you actually can choose which retailer you want to buy it from. You know, whatever that could be, like could be Amazon, could be Walmart, Target, Barnes and Noble, what have you. You go buy the book, and then you come back to the website. It takes you through the instructions on this, and you literally just put your order number in, and that's how we deliver your bonuses. So you put your order number, your email, and it delivers your bonuses to you. And so, yeah, if it's, I'll check here in a minute, but if it's available on Kindle by the time you're ordering it, then it doesn't matter if you use Kindle or purchase your print book, because we just need to know the order number to keep track. So whether you order Kindle or print doesn't matter to me at all. And yeah, so basically, but you're buying it, which I think is really different. You're buying it off the retailer. You're not buying it off our site.
Okay.
And I mean, I know most of your focus is on writing and speaking side, but I'll tell you, for people to understand why that's the case, meaning why are we doing it the way we're doing it, it actually has a lot to do with the fact that by doing it this way, basically it allows us to have each of those sales count towards bestseller lists and what have you. So in other words, if it was self-published and you were ordering it from, let's say you're ordering it from my website, then it wouldn't count towards any of those sales numbers, bestsellers. To be honest, we wouldn't even hit Amazon's bestseller list possibly if we were just doing it through my website. So that's the reason we did it this way. Is it's with a traditional publisher. You're still buying it as if you've discovered it on your own. It's just that you're able to get bonuses, and from our end, then it counts towards bestsellers.
And it's a novel way of doing things.
Yeah, it's definitely different.
Yeah.
I mean, there's other people that obviously do it that way, but it's not. I would say it's not the most common, especially now. Obviously, the most common is to go like to self-publish. That's even way more common now.
Yes, exactly. Well, I'm really interested to see how this is going to work out, because obviously our audience is global. So that the Barnes and Noble thing, that works for the US, but we don't have that in Australia. I'm in Malaysia at the moment, so that's a totally different situation. So again, for people who are traveling, the Kindle is rather handy, because I'm in an experiment at the moment. I'm just going to do a quick shameless plug, because my book next year will be My Life with 20 Kilos, because that's my luggage limit. So when you've got that situation, and I've got a whole heap of books I would love to be bringing, but if it's on Kindle, it doesn't weigh extra.
I know. I love that. It's such a. I mean, I get it totally.
I would physically love to have all the books, because I'm a very sensory person, and I love the physical thing of turning the pages. But when you're traveling, you can't afford the weight.
Well, and to your point, it's such a great point, because I'm going to reach out to the publisher today to ask them because I know they know that the focus has been on print first. So I got to check with them to see if the Kindle's out yet, or to see where that's at. Just so it'll be obviously during the launch. It's important to know that, because the other thing too now, and this is unique, is Kindle actually counts towards the big bestseller list now. It never used to. Like, it used to be. Okay. Some of them never did at all. Like, some of them never counted it as far as its own thing. Some counted it as its own thing, and you could only make a bestseller list with Kindle, and some you could only make it with printed copy. But now, the two big bestseller lists that are still around merged both of them.
Right.
So in other words, if you sell, like, let's say before you had to sell 10,000 books, and let's say that meant print copies, you could sell 9,000 print and 80,000 Kindle and still not make the list. Whereas now, if it's combined, then it's better anyway, because then it allows you to give the clients a choice. But when we set up, this just all changed recently. So when we were planning all this, we were planning it around print because it wasn't that way. But now it's changed. So now you prompted me that I'm going to make sure that the publisher on the ebook, and then the audio will come out at some point, but it's not ready right yet.
Sure. That was going to be my next question, because I mean, people consume things in different ways these days, don't they? And it's not, I'm the author and I'm going to dictate that you have to read it in print. because you're losing half your audience.
100%. Well, and I'll tell you too, Wendy, part of my approach with this is to do multiple launches. So I never liked the idea with books that people, myself included, will do a launch and then it hits bestseller and then they go and then walk away and then they're doing something else. And so this one here, I'm doing multiple launches. So that's probably also why I'm not concerned the Audible's not out yet, is because that, and the Audible really at this point doesn't really count towards bestseller lists. So for me, it's not as much as I'm trying to dictate as much as it is for the short term. I'm trying to have one of those pages where your only choices are yes or no, so it's like, so I'm like, I don't want, if you choose the Audible, it's one less sale that can count towards a bestseller list. And if I can hit, let's say USA Today or New York Times, then what it does is it gets you on lists where all of a sudden people are talking about your book. And allows you to reach way more people. So I'm thinking impact, but then I'm still not, I don't want to leave the Audible people out. So let's say June is the pub date. Like by August, we might have the audiobook out. Like, it's not like I'm going to do it like 3 years from now. It's just that it'll be very soon.
It's not the A1 priority.
Right. And the same time, for some people, the bonuses that we're offering, the free bonuses with the book, are honestly, for some people, that's why they'll get the book for the bonuses. Now, I'll share one thing too, Wendy, because I don't know on the marketing side how much you guys are covering, but I'll say this. One thing I'm planning to do, and it's completely, so somebody could steal this from me before I even do it really. It's completely theoretical because I haven't done it yet. But one of the big things that I also struggle with is that only I forget the numbers, I've heard 15% of people that buy a book ever make it to the end. It's like a small number.
Page 18.
Yeah. Well, and there's an actual number, whatever percentage make it to the end of chapter 1 and all that. And so what I want to do is I want to incentivize people to read my book. So when I said about the content, or when the free bonuses, that's to get you to buy the book, because I need to get you to take the first step to buy the book. Now, the hope is that normal 20% or whatever will read the book, or a buzz will go around and will say, I still have that book, I should read it. That's one thing. But then what I thought I would do, the way it's structured in Canada is you can't set up a contest where you have to purchase something. Like, in other words, you can't say you have to make a purchase to enter the contest. So what I decided to do is, once the books are purchased, so that way it's not saying you have to purchase it to do this, but once the books are purchased, we'll have the emails of those who purchased the books, because the way it's structured, to get the bonuses,
you've got to give you the email. Yeah.
Right. So then what we'll do is we're going to go to all those people who now have their hands on the book, and we're going to run a really high-end contest, like thousands of dollars in prizes, for those that can tell us certain parts of the book. Nice. And it's throughout the whole book. So, and it's a short book, by the way. It's a little tiny, it's a small book. And so for me, all of a sudden, a person's going to realize, well, if I can answer these 5 questions, it's easier probably just to read this darn little book than it is to try to go to each of those places. So I'm really trying to push the idea of, here's why you need to buy the book. And then I'm also going to push the idea of, here's why you need to crack open the book. Yes. We'll see what happens with that. But that's the plan, because the book has a lot of twists and turns. At the end, it says something to the effect of, if you want one of the character to the other, if you want to change the world, make sure to pass on these insights. So the idea there is for you as the reader to go, well, geez, I should buy this for somebody because I need to pass on these insights. So it's all structured a specific way.
Just to give you the heads up, Corey, when I do the YouTube thing, when I put the show notes up, I always introduce it with a quote. I think I've just grabbed my first quote from you. Thank you.
My
excellent. Beautiful
pleasure.
Beautiful. So that's the book coming out. And as we're winding up, because I'm aware that I've had lots of your lovely time, with the taking your words from the page and bringing them to life on stage, is there something that you can share with our potentially reluctant audience? Because how do you do it? Is there something that you do? Some people do visualization things, some people do breath work, some people have a ritual. Is there something that you can share with the audience to, if you like, try out as to how you take those words and take them from page to stage?
So there's 2 sides of that, Wendy, because there's a side of strategy to actually get yourself onto the stage, open your mouth, deliver a message. That's a different thing, I suppose, in the sense that it's like, how do you overcome, how do you take that first step once you get on the stage to actually start talking? That's different because obviously by that point, in theory, you know your lines, you know what you're going to say or whatever. That, like me, I don't have lines, but you know what you're going to say.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'll give you two, because one strategy is, you mentioned meditation. And so the meditation I see is different than, for example, memorizing or knowing your work. That's how do you actually get over the fear of getting on the stage in the first place? So if we're talking about that, I used to meditate before my talks. However, I changed it because what I found is that, this is from a perspective of working with a lot of meeting planners. What I used to do is I would meditate, but you can't sit there and meditate you could, but it seemed weird to sit there and meditate meditate at the table with, because usually you're sat with like the CEO, the founder, the meeting planner, what have you. So to sit at that table and meditate while other speakers are talking, it's distracting. They're gonna also go, what's up with this dude? And so I used to walk away and go meditate somewhere just before I went on stage. Problem I found with that from a meeting planner point of view is they're starting to panic.
Yes.
Like, where'd this guy go? And did he forget? Did he go to the bathroom, get lost? And so I found it added undue or unnecessary stress. So I changed it. So what I do now is much easier for me, better for them, all the way around. It's better. So what I do, and I think there's a lot of ways you can do this. You don't have to have the exact ones that I have, but I have a lot of, over the years, testimonials or comments that people said, this changed my life. So what I do is I think about, before I get on stage, something someone said. Like, in other words, your quote about this changed my life. You mentioned this changed my life. So I actually think about, what did I say that changed their life? And that's what I put in my head before I say my first word. The reason for that is to remind myself that it may not feel like it right now when I'm nervous and in the moment, but I'm making a difference in people's lives. And that person, the next person that says that quote, could be in this audience right now. So I could be actually delivering a message that's going to get that quote. But it also, what it does, it reminds you it's not about me, it's about the audience. And I find that's a big challenge. The reason I used to get nervous all the time is I kept thinking about me over and over again. Like, what if I do this? What if I do that? And I would forget about the fact that I'm here for them. And if I just focus on delivering a message to the people in front of me, all will work itself out. So that's what I do from a strategic point of view, is I literally just remind myself I am making a difference. I use an actual quote. And then I think maybe the next person sharing that shares a quote like this with me could be in this audience. So this is my chance to make a difference for them. That's how I do it from a strategic point of view, and getting over the fear of that first word, because it's still nerve-wracking, that first word. As far as bringing it to a stage, because it's a different format, writing versus stage. And it also depends, is your book fictional, is it nonfiction, all that kind of stuff. But what I do is I structure it so that, if you think of a book structure, if you think of chapters, so chapter 1 could be getting outside your comfort zone, and then you write all about that in your book. Well, what I do when I get on stage is I make step 1 getting outside your comfort zone. And it, like, within the chapters, if I have 3 strategies, that becomes my 3 takeaways during my talk. So I literally structure my talk when I put it together, and my my book when I put it together, and my talk in a similar way. So my chapters in a book are like my sections or my steps in the talk. The one last thing I'll give for a tip that changed everything for me is I do use PowerPoint. So a lot of people, what do they call it? PowerPoint is, I forget, death of PowerPoint and all that stuff.
Death by PowerPoint.
That's my PowerPoint. For me, I use it, but I use it in a way different than most people do, and different than when I started, which again ties back to how I can take it from a book or a page to the stage. But what I do is, on my PowerPoint, typically, the only thing you're going to see is images. So you're not going to see any words. You're going to see a picture of me performing stand-up comedy, and that's going to be my story to tell you about the night I performed comedy without the mic turned on. And so if I shared that story in a book, I would share the story of, like, death by comedy, or whatever. And then I would have that. Well, that becomes my slide now. But in the book, it's written. But then when I bring it over, I'm like, what would be the visual that I have, a picture or something that I can put on a slide? When I first started, I would take visuals for, like, I would literally Google, Google images and try to find ones that were copyright free. But now I've done it long enough. Now I use my own images that, if I had to, I'd even take a picture that would represent that. Like, maybe if it was about going into a store and have a bad experience customer service, maybe I'll get somebody to take a picture of me, like, at a store where I know the owner, and I'm just there, like, holding the food or whatever. Like, so, but I want it to be all my images now, because it reinforces that I'm the speaker. But the reason why, for me, I do that way, Wendy, where I still have the slides, because it keeps me on track. And at the same time, the reason I do it with the visuals instead of bullet points, because it's important for people to know, is bullet points. If somebody's watching me speak and I have bullet points, they're making notes. They're not paying attention to me. I'm no longer the focus. And I don't want to be the focus to be like, look at Corey, he's doing stuff. I want to be the focus so I can deliver a message. Otherwise, I could have just emailed you my PowerPoint. So the visuals, and that's the thing, people say, can we use your PowerPoint to share with all our staff? You sure can, but I don't know how they're going to understand any of it if they weren't there for the talk, because you're going to see a picture of me performing stand-up. It means nothing. But my point about that is, so I use the visuals because I think it reinforces the story, and you remember the story because of the visual. But it also, you're not then paying attention to the slide. You're actually paying attention to me.
Well, this is it. Because I mean, the number of times when I've had speakers who want to have their slides lots of writing on, like, no, please don't, because the average speed of reading is 250 words a minute. The average speed of speaking is 150 words a minute. So people inevitably will be reading ahead of what you're saying. And then when they've got to the end, they're going, oh, you're only just there. And the mind's wandering off on, what's for tea tonight? And you've lost them. The point is, just don't put your notes up there. If you have to have notes and you've got your presentation, have them on your speaker notes.
Absolutely.
Ideally, you don't need them. But yes, I mean, it's the images, isn't it? They're the things that people remember.
Yeah, and people ask me how I tell stories, and like I mean, there's the memorizing side, but for me, honestly, that image is the story. Like, if I lived that story about the stand-up and not having the mic turned on, as long as I craft that story, like that story's improved over time, we'll call it, and it's Hollywoodized, but it's like, the story hasn't changed. I just found the parts of it that were most important, most impactful. But what I'm getting at is that image that just tells me, okay, go time. And then I know the story. I would say if you're struggling with that, like you need the notes to tell a story, then you don't know the story well enough yet.
Yeah.
That's just my take on it. So that's why I don't need notes, is because that story could change too. Like I could be in the moment with that story and realize, ooh, I never mentioned this part before. Let's test it. And I could test it. It could go over huge. So the next time I tell this, as long as I remember to say it the next time, then that could become part of the story. And so, yeah, it's not, I'm not memorizing my story. I just know my story.
Yeah. And the thing is, if it's your story, then nobody's going to know any different whether you tweak it this way or that way anyway, because they weren't there. It was you.
Yeah. Yeah. If I forgot to say, which would be weird because it's the whole cusp of the joke or the story is to get to the point where the mic wasn't turned on. But if I forgot that, I can still finish the story in a different way. It won't get the laugh, but you're still going to go, oh my God, he performed stand-up comedy. Oh my God, he got tricked into it. Oh my God, 8 of the 15 people walked out the front door as soon as they found out they're performing that night, and he stayed. And like, there's still so many elements of the story that's going to pull you in. Obviously, that's the finish point of the story. But I could so for example, if I forgot that part for whatever reason, I have a backup joke. This is another little tip, but the idea is to get the laugh from it didn't have the mic turned on. Honestly, Wendy, it's like 99.9% that one has worked. But if it didn't, I have an extra part that sometimes I share. Sometimes I share it just for fun, but if it didn't work, so the gist is I didn't know to turn the mic on. I told my first 2 jokes. Nobody heard them. I wasn't getting laughs. I thought it was because the jokes weren't funny. It was because the mic wasn't turned on. But then people used to ask me all the time, well, what happened after that? You never share what happened like after you got the mic turned on. So I tell people now, well, we got the mic turned on and I told the same 2 jokes again. And guess what? They bombed again. So now I think I'm the only comic in history to tell the same jokes twice in 10 minutes and bomb twice in 10 minutes. And so I can add that extra part if I want. But if I forgot to say I had the mic turned on, I could literally jump into that part of it. Like, I could recover and go back to not having the mic turned on, but it would lose the moment because it's part of a sequence. But I could still say, I was terrible. I bombed. And like I told you, I bombed for a year and a half. Like I could go into that part and say, so I bombed for a year and a half. And even that first night, I forgot to turn the mic on. And when we finally turned it on, I told the material again, and it still bombed. Like what I'm saying is I can still fix it if I know the story.
Sure. You've got to know your own material.
100%.
And if it's your material because you lived it, then it's a heck of a lot easier than trying to remember somebody else's words.
It is. And if you believe in the 10,000 hour rule, I see it in real life every day. Like I said, I went from person that couldn't play a guitar, couldn't tune a guitar by ear, to become nominated for a Rock Recording of the Year award. Stand-up comedy, from bombing horribly, not even getting a laugh for a year and a half, to performing at Second City. And the other one is the speaking. My wife, to this day, like, she'll watch, like, so I just did a couple of talks at UCLA, and she was watching the video, and she goes, "Oh my God, it's like you're a different person speaking wise from when I first got together with you." Well, she only got together with me in 2015, and I started speaking in 2002. So I had already been being paid thousands of dollars per talk when we met. And she's looking from when she met me till now, and she says, like, it's a million miles of difference. Which, so imagine what it's like from that first night I ever performed stand-up comedy on a stage and covered in sweat and didn't have the mic turned on, to at UCLA this past week. Like, it's why I bring this up, Wendy, is yes, the stuff we're talking about is how you get going and how you get started. But what I want people to know is I started there too, probably further behind than you are, because I was terrified and didn't want to be honest. I didn't even want to. You already are at the point where you know you want to, probably, if you're thinking about doing it. But I went from there to now speaking at prestigious universities, and I won't say effortless, but with a lot more ease than when I started.
Yep.
So you can learn this
patience
stuff.
And persistence. Keep going, keep going, keep going. You're nearly at the gold thread. Yep.
But nobody wants to, because we're in a microwave society right now where, and this is not to the person listening right now, this is just a generalized statement, but we're in a world now where we want the quick fix. Like, how do I become a Tony Robbins level speaker tomorrow? Well, when are you going to start speaking? I think next week. So wait a minute, you haven't spoken yet, but you want to become Tony Robbins tomorrow. Like, we're in that world right now. I want to be the CEO of the company. I started working here last week. Come on, let's get to it. Like, make me the CEO. We're in that world to some degree. And that's not even an individual problem. I think that was pushed on us in a lot of ways by social media and what have you. And so what I'm getting at is, even though there's a temptation to want to do that, stuff like speaking, you get better as you work the craft, period.
Well, you do it. Yeah, exactly. When I was back in Perth, I actually had a little wooden star and a stick. Once upon a time, the wooden star was on top of the stick, and occasionally I used to hold it up, but then the blue tack dried up and it fell off. And I go, yeah, see, the magic wand doesn't work.
Absolutely. Yeah, brilliant.
On that note, Corey, I'm going to wind up. Is there anything else we've missed? We've got your book launch coming out in June, but now is the time to pre-order for all those wonderful bonuses. You're flip-flopping between the stage and the page on a regular basis, but you're crafting and you're practicing your craft in both directions. Because one of the other things that I'm finding with these reluctant authors is, I'm an author, I'm not a speaker. I'm going, hang on, it's not an either or. It's a both and, please. And you can possibly be a musician, you can be a comic, you can be all sorts of things. It's not a single identity. So here we have a wonderful case in point in Corey. Multiple talents, but ones that he's doggedly worked at. Thank you for being such a wonderful role model. Anything else we've missed off, sir?
I don't think so. What I will say, and it seems kind of weird, because when I wrote this book that I mentioned, the Passenger book, obviously, like I said, it's a parable. So I had the idea for a while, and then I sat down and actually physically wrote it. And one of the things that was interesting to me is early on trying to figure out who was the audience for the book. So like, if you think about The Secret, would be a great example. For those that have heard of The Secret, the book, I mean, it sold millions and millions of copies. Early on, I'm like, well, who is The Secret for? It's really tough, because you could be a millionaire, a billionaire, struggling financially, overweight, underweight, just right, whatever just right is supposed to be in our society. You could be all those things, and the book still could be for you. So it gets hard to say. It's not like a book where you say, okay, you want to lose 20 pounds, here's the solution. It's not as simple as that. Why I bring this up is because ultimately what I feel the book is, it's about, well, first of all, learning the secrets of the best who've ever done it, because that's where I spend my time learning from them. It's about learning those, but these 10 lessons will make you better, in my opinion, at everything you do. So in other words, even as a speaker, even as a writer, these lessons will make you better at it. And so to give you one nugget, one of the things that the character talks about is the importance of having your own personal mission statement. Right. And I would ask the question, if you're listening as an audience right now, if I ask this in a room, some people, like, I see 50 hands go up in a room of 1,000. And I would say, Wendy, out of those 50 hands, probably only 5 of them really have one. If they knew that I was going to make them read theirs or tell me theirs, they probably wouldn't put their hand up. I hate to say, but sometimes we're like, I want to say I do that because it sounds like I should be doing that. But what my experience has been, my true experience is less than 5% of the people in the world have a mission statement. I would say it's even lower than that. And so when I say a mission statement, I mean, carry around with you something that says, mine is, I want to be the guy who motivates, donates, educates, entertains, and inspires. And so when you know what your mission statement is, it keeps you aligned with everything you say yes and no to. So if somebody says, do you want to do this? And you go, it's only going to be one of those. It's an easy no without regret. So what I'm getting at, I just shared this so you see it in the book. That's one example. That's not even a lesson. That's a lesson within a lesson. That's not even one of the 10. But if you think about, if you had your own personal mission statement, how would that help you as a speaker? You know, and your mission statement could be speaker oriented. It could be written, like it could be about your writing. And so what I'm saying, and maybe you have one for each, but what I'm saying is writing a mission statement can be life-changing. Another one is, how would you live your last day? If today was your last day, write down the list of what you would actually spend your time doing. And so what I'm getting at is those type of things, those life lessons, in my opinion, will make you better as a speaker, as a writer. And so this book is really designed for anybody who wants to actually get better at what they do, and they want to learn the secrets of the best who've ever done it around how to do it much easier. And I always say, like, it blows my mind that we can get that stuff for $15, you know, in a book, or $20 in a book. Whenever people have paid, and we know this, people have paid, well, I've paid, because the amount of cost I've had for the interviews to fly to them and everything else, I've paid over $100,000 to learn what I'm sharing in this book. So having said that, the one thing I would say, as far as is there anything else to share, for me, it would be, that's a reason to get the book, in my opinion. I mean, obviously I'm passionate about it. I care about your impact. You know, I'm biased as far as that goes, because I want to change your life. But that's what I would say. Looking at this book, I would make the case that that's what this book is intended to do. And then I would say, on the other side, if you want to get started as a writer and a speaker, you have to get started. You know, there's a great quote by Zig Ziglar that says, you don't, and it was quoted to Zig, I think it's his, but it says, you don't have to be great to get started, but you sure have to start if you want to become great.
Yes.
And so what I would say, the last part is take action. Like, it might not look pretty at first. It might, and by the way, I always jokingly have said to people in the past that have been struggling with the book, they never released, but they've been writing it for years. I always say, you know, my mediocre book that's impacting lives is better than your brilliant book that nobody ever reads. And so what I'm getting at is that you need to start. And so there's people probably sitting on the fence. What I will tell you is it gets easier and you get better over time. And the great thing is you can always edit in today's world. We're in a print on demand world. So get the book out there, decent or good. And I mean, we all want it to be brilliant, but decent or good at least. Get the book out there and you can change it. You can literally make changes to the book a month later and upload a new version, but you're impacting lives already. And if you hold on to it till it's perfect, you might never get it out there and your legacy might go with you.
Yep.
So it's the case I'd like to make. Get your book out now, get on stages now, start the process. The cheap plug is get the Enlightened Passenger. And I think it'll give you some of that extra, what do I do to get better at my crafts? And what do I do to build and insulate my ability to withstand all the crappy stuff that's going to happen? Because that's the other side, right? Like, people, how do you deal with the crappy stuff? I say, well, I made so many positive deposits early on that now I can make withdrawals, meaning the withdrawals are like the negative stuff that happens, and I can deflect it because I already have built up my tank.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Corey, for sharing your page to stage with us. We will make sure that all the links to Corey's wonderful work, both his book that he's shamelessly plugging, which sounds brilliant, by the way, and also some of the links as to how to get hold of Corey, because you want him in your corner when it comes to understanding a bit more, both from the writing side and the speaking side. But for now, Corey, thank you so much for sharing your from page to stage.
Thank you myself. I appreciate it, Wendy.
For now, everyone, bye from us.